The structural history of the Roman military concerns the major transformations in the organization and constitution of ancient Rome's armed forces, the most effective and long-lived military institution known to history. At the highest level of structure, the forces were split into the Roman army and the Roman navy, although these two branches were less distinct than in many modern national defense forces. Within the top levels of both army and navy, structural changes occurred as a result of both positive military reform and organic structural evolution. These changes can be divided into four distinct phases. Phase 1, the army was derived from obligatory annual military service levied on the citizenry, as part of their duty to the state. During this period, the Roman army would wage seasonal campaigns against largely local adversaries. According to the historians Livy and Dionysius of Halicarnassus, writing at a far later date, the earliest Roman army existed in the 8th century BC. During this period Rome itself was probably little more than a fortified hilltop settlement and its army a relatively small force, whose activities were limited mainly to raiding and cattle rustling with the occasional skirmish-like battle. Historian Theodore Mommsen referred to it as Rome's Curiate army, named for its presumed subdivision along the boundaries of Rome's three founding tribes, Latin, Curii, the Ramnians, Tities and Luceres. This army's exact structure is not known, but it is probable that it loosely resembled a warrior band or group of bodyguards led by a chieftain or king. Mommsen believes that Roman military organization of this period was regimented by the laws of the apocryphal King Vitalis, but these laws, though referred to by Aristotle, have been lost. The army, Latin, legio, consisted, according to Livy, of exactly 3,000 infantry and 300 horsemen, one-third from each of Rome's three founding tribes. Warriors served under 6 leaders of division, Latin, tribuni, who in turn served under a general, usually in the person of the reigning king. Mommsen uses philological arguments and references from Livy and others to suggest that the greater mass of foot soldiers probably consisted of pylumni, javelin throwers, with a smaller number possibly serving as archetes, archers. The cavalry was far smaller in number and probably consisted solely of the town's richest citizens. The army may also have contained the earliest form of chariots, hinted at by references to the flexons, the wheelers. By the beginning of the 7th century BC, the Iron Age Etruscan civilization, Latin, Etrusi, was dominant in the region. Like most of the other peoples in the region, the Romans warred against the Etruscans. By the close of the century, the Romans had lost their struggle for independence, and the Etruscans had conquered Rome, establishing a military dictatorship, or kingdom, in the city. The early Roman army was deployed by ancient Rome during its regal era and into the early Republic around 300 BC, when the so-called Polybian or Manipular Legion was introduced. Until c. 550 BC, there was probably no national Roman army, but a series of clan-based warbands, which only coalesced into a united force in periods of serious external threat. Around 550 BC, during the period conventionally known as the rule of King Servius Tullius, it appears that a universal levy of eligible adult male citizens was instituted. This development apparently coincided with the introduction of heavy armor for most of the infantry. The early Roman army was based on a compulsory levy from adult male citizens that was held at the start of each campaigning season, in those years that war was declared. There were probably no standing or professional forces. During the regal era to c. 500 BC, the standard levy was probably of 9,000 men, consisting of 6,000 heavily armed infantry, probably Greek-style hoplites, plus 2,400 light-armed infantry, rererii, later called velites, and 600 light cavalry, equites celeres. When the kings were replaced by 2 annually elected consuls in c. 500 BC, the standard levy remained of the same size, but was now divided equally between the consuls, each commanding one legion of 4,500 men. It is likely that the hoplite element was deployed in a Greek-style phalanx formation in large set-piece battles. However, these were relatively rare, with most fighting consisting of small-scale border raids and skirmishing. In these, the Romans would fight in their basic tactical unit, the centuria of 100 men. In addition, clan-based forces remained in existence until at least c. 450 BC, although they would operate under the consul's authority, at least nominally. In 493 BC, shortly after the establishment of the Roman Republic, Rome concluded a perpetual treaty of military alliance, the Foedus Cassianum, with the combined other Latin city-states. The treaty, probably motivated by the need for the Latins to deploy a united defense against incursions by neighboring hill tribes, provided for each party to provide an equal force for campaigns under unified command. It remained in force until 358 BC. On the basis of Etruscan representations, it has been widely accepted that the main early Roman infantry type was an armored hoplite. These hoplite would probably have worn bronze helmets, breastplate and greaves and a round leather or large circular bronze-plated wooden shield. They were armed with a spear, sword, and dagger. According to the ancient Greek historian Polybius, whose histories written c. 140s BC are the earliest substantial extant account of the Republic, Roman cavalry was originally unarmored, wearing only a tunic and armed with a light spear and ox-hide shield, which were of low quality and quickly deteriorated in action, as it appears that early Roman heavy infantry were armed as Greek-style hoplites, so it is assumed that it followed the Greek practice of fighting in a phalanx formation. This was a deep, 8 ranks or more, densely packed formation of heavily armored spearmen, developed in Greece in the 7th century BC. The phalanx would aim to charge and break through the enemy line. Fighting was in tied formation, stabbing with the spear. Phalanx fighting required extensive training, as holding formation was critical to success. Goldsworthy points out, however, that the phalanx was only suitable for large-scale set-piece battles. It was impractical for the small-scale raiding and skirmishing that remained the most frequent type of fighting that Rome was involved in during this period. Despite the establishment of a national levy in the regal era, aristocratic warbands continued to play a role into the first decades of the Republic. Example: the warband of the Fabii, which in 479 BC was charged by the praetores with guarding Roman territory against raids from the neighboring Etruscan city of Veii, only to be ambushed by the Veientines and wiped out, supposedly leaving only one Fabius alive to perpetuate the clan. In these minor operations, a smaller tactical unit would have been essential, and there is no reason to doubt that it was the centuria. Most likely in the regal period it actually consisted of 100 men, as its name implies. Light infantry, velites, and cavalry would also have been important in small-scale skirmishes.